First off, I'd like to talk to you about the new album, Curious Volume. What are you most excited about with that?
Well, I'm excited to get out on the road and support it, really. And just we didn't really know what we had, going in because it was sort of we didn't have a lot of material, working up to right before we went in to record. So we sort of put the material together in a short amount of time. Other than there's like four songs on there, that sort of comes from Bobby's old demos, which is sort of a typical thing for every Pentagram album, Um, but we have a lot of new material on this album, probably the most new material since, you know, maybe Before Warned or something. And So it was exciting to, sort of, be able to work with all this new material. We didn't quite know what we had, and it was very under rehearsed, which I sort of like because you don't go into the studio with too much of a uh, preconceived notion of what you think it's going to or what it should sound like. And so even after we were kind of finished with the recording process, we still were a little bit like, wow, we weren't so sure if, do we have a good album or we don't have a good album. And until the reviews started coming out, and everybody seems to be, 90% of the reviews, people are just loving it. So that's very exciting for us, man.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about the recording and writing process because, I mean, like, does Bobby come to you with a whole lot of ideas, or how does that work? Do you guys all jam it out and talk amongst yourselves and write stuff together, or how does that work?
Well, normally Bobby doesn't really write a lot of material, these days. I mean, he writes lyrics occasionally, but as far as writing like a whole complete song with music and stuff like that, he doesn't really do much of that anymore. So he usually he will come up with four or five songs from some old demos or something like that, and preferably something that hasn't already been recorded at some point, you know. But so he comes up with a few things, and then on this particular album, as in with Last Rites, with since Greg Turley, we've been playing with Greg Turley. Uh, he's a writer too, so we're able to put our he writes material, I write material, and but we mostly sort of do it on our own time, and then we present the ideas, in a rehearsal situation a lot of times, and just kind of kick it around and see what we have from there. This particular album, though, we were sort of all spread out, and we were actually just sending files back and forth with different parts, and was kind of kicking those ideas around and off of each other about just what do you think of this? What do you think of this vibe? Is this a cool riff? Blah blah blah. Stuff like that. So, and then there was a couple of songs, where Greg had like say three guitar parts, but really no structure. Actually, and so like the song "Curious Volume" was sort of like that. So he had all the guitar parts, and I was like, wow, these are all really good parts. And then I sort of structured put the structure to it, and then wrote the lyrics. And so that was more or less how we did the co-writes. Um, and that was really fun, and that was really cool. That's kind of how it mostly came together. We weren't necessarily in a room jamming together and that kind of thing at all on this album. So you know, that's obviously another reason why we were so kind of unsure of what we had even going into the studio.
Awesome. So, with that in mind and everything, and the fact that you guys have essentially, as a band, been around for 40 plus years, what do you think helps you keep it fresh? Because I mean, you guys are still playing a style of music which is very much based in the past, yet it is still sounding extremely fresh. What do you think helps you keep that?
I think it's um, just sticking to our roots, mostly, and not trying to, I guess, not trying to be a band that we're not, and just in order to sort of keep up with things, or keep up with any sort of trends or what we think the audience might expect or even like to hear. We just kind of do what we do, and that's how we did it from the beginning. We wrote songs that we wanted, that we liked, and that we wanted to hear, and it's taken 30 or 40 years, for the general public, I guess. I wouldn't say it's that mainstream. Obviously, the doom, the doom metal genre has gotten some recognition these days, but we've always just done what we liked, and we didn't put much thought into, or care if anyone else liked it or not. And we still approach it that way. We don't go in with like, okay, well, we had this album, say Last Rites, we did this. Should we do this album in order to please, make sure that they like this song or whatever. And so there's no formula. We don't necessarily have a formula. The only formula we have is just the roots of the kind of music that we grew up with and loved, just based in heavy style rock and roll. Um, of course, has the dark overtones and all that kind of stuff, and that's where I guess the doom metal genre tag comes from. Uh, and that's cool. But I think this album, it has all the doom flavors in there, but it's really a pretty much straight ahead, just heavy hard rock album.
Yeah, well, that's my take on it as well. And yeah, personally, I really love the whole doom element as well. But I mean, it's still quite, how would you call it? There's a lot of psychedelic sort of stuff in there as well, and everything. There's a lot of old school origin metal, I guess you could call it. Which sort of leads me to my next question, which is about the state of modern metal. Considering that you guys were there right back at the start.
Yeah. As far as modern metal, I I might be the wrong. Oh, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I might be the wrong guy to ask that question. And the only reason I say that is because I don't really listen or keep up to a lot of newer metal stuff. Um, and it's not that I don't think there's some good stuff out there, but I think that there's such an oversaturation in the market, with which has come along with the internet and YouTube and home recording equipment. So you have this saturation of just bands and music, and especially in the like the doom metal, the whole doom metal thing. I think a lot of people have the wrong idea of actually what it even is. It's not. It doesn't necessarily have to be like down-tuned guitars playing extremely slow riffs. And I think as far as the vocals and the lyrics of what is considered doom metal these days is completely off base. It never was about being as dark and satanic as you could be or anything like that. It's more doom metal was just a type of music with a melancholy feel. Obviously heavy, but it dealt with just like what you and I and everybody else has to deal with in life a lot. And sometimes that's depression, it's darkness, it's the struggles and trials that we go through day to day. And that was really uh, what we consider doom metal. I mean, I think that's where the influence came, even from like Sabbath. I mean, their lyrics were just about the rights and wrongs of life and having to deal with that kind of thing. And over the years, it's sort of changed into just really what I consider just basically death metal slowed down. You know, um, but I guess there's still some bands who are doing it good. I don't really keep up with a lot of it. I tend to go back, and stuff I listen to these days is just a throwback to blues players, really. Buddy Guy, stuff like that. Some of the newer people, somewhat new, I guess. Warren Haynes and Government Mule, and I've been kind of on an Allman Brothers kick lately, man. But that's stuff that I incorporate into songwriting these days, but I do it with the heavy feel that I like to have to it as well. So I don't know if that really answers your question very much, but
Well, I think that actually gives me an absolutely perfect answer because I mean it sort of talks about what is going on in the state of metal at the moment, and the fact that there is, like you talked about, that oversaturation. That is the reality. So you might not think that was that you were the right person to ask, but I think in some ways you were, because you gave us exactly the right answer. Um, when the band started way back in the 70s and everything, and when you came into the band later on, what would you describe as some of the main influences that you had for that period?
My personal influences. Um, is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, your personal influences, because naturally they came through in the band, but
Yeah.
also for the band, because you guys starting out in that era, there was not really many other bands doing that sort of thing, and to an extent, you guys were the originators. So, um, this is where what sort of things influenced you guys musically to create what you do.
Well, as far as the band in the '70s, I didn't know anything about the '70s version of Pentagram. Um, Throughout the '70s, I didn't know anything about what they were doing, or any of that. I mean, I grew up with my personal influences where the early Alice Cooper group. It was the Alice Cooper group, more or less. I mean, and then later on, Alice Cooper, became Alice Cooper, but it wasn't like that at the beginning. And I mean, I discovered them when I was 9, 10 years old, and bands like Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf was my favorite band when I was 9, and and then later came Sabbath. Bands like Nazareth, early ZZ Top, and then a little bit more into the mid or late '70s. Bands like Sir Lord Baltimore, uh, where that was some of my favorite stuff. And what influenced me the most. Um, and through all that, I started a band right out of high school called Death Row, which is when I wrote songs. I actually had written songs during that time period, like the song Relentless and Dying World and Sinister, from the first Pentagram album, actually. And, when I met Joe Hasselvander, who I met through my older sister because she happened to be dating him and lived up in the DC area. I mean, that's how I met Joe, and found out, he was into all this heavy music and so forth, a great drummer. And we were looking for a drummer at the time, and so it felt like the natural thing to do was hook up, and then we needed a singer, of course. And our whole concept was just to be this heavy, dark, and we were calling it doom metal. We want a doom band, and but there was really no genre. We were just calling it that because that's what it sounded like to us. It was just doomy. So we were calling it, we want to start a doom band, um, and then we needed a singer, of course. And that's when Bobby introduced me to Pentagram. He said, I know this guy, Bobby. He had this band Pentagram, but they've been broken up for years. And then it turns out, Joe had played in Pentagram for a year or two, around '78 or so. And so he said, but the only thing about the guy is he kind of, he comes with a lot of baggage, so, um, so we weren't very sure about that. But once I heard the recordings and everything, he seemed perfect for what we were doing. And then when we got introduced, we kind of hit it off right away. And, and it was just a mixture of Joe's, uh, influences, Bobby's influences, and my influences. We're all similar, along with Blue Cheer, um, and some of the other underground bands. Trying to think. Hmm, I can't think. It was just Blue Cheer, the Sabbath Blue Cheer thing, and the other earlier heavy bands, Alice Cooper and stuff like that. But we just kind of incorporated that into our own thing, and that's where it came. That's where it all started for me, anyway, and that was around 1981. And we recorded the Death Row demo, which eventually in 1985 became the first Pentagram album. Are you
That's
still there?
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm enjoying listening. So, what would you describe now as the influences for? I mean, because naturally, when you go into writing and everything, in the writing mode and everything, your influences would have changed from those days to now.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a progression in a sense, you know. It's but after so many years, I mean, you know, recording ever how many albums, you know, I think this is the fifth Pentagram album I've recorded, if you don't include the live stuff, of course. And then because I wasn't on any of the albums, uh, you know, in the 2000s. Uh,
Yeah.
so, and then of course, you know, I've done I've recorded like 5 Place of Skulls albums, and then this engraved project that I did a couple of years ago. And so when I combine all the recordings that I've done from my influences, you know, I can sort of see a progression of players that came along after those early influences that, you know, sort of sparked my creativity too. And, you know, I would have to say that some of those were, you know, Warren Haynes of Government Mule. Um, and you know, and somebody I didn't mention earlier also was Brian May. I mean, I always liked that. I was a big Brian May fan, and from Queen, and but as the years progressed, and you know, I kind of incorporated all that stuff and began to develop my own style. I think the last few years actually has almost been a reversal, where uh, I've kind of gone back and started to rediscover some of my earlier influences in ways that I didn't necessarily feel at the time. You know, as being a young kid and having these influences, I wasn't necessarily influenced in certain ways directly to my own playing because I wasn't really playing then. You know, but as that music comes back to mind and back to your heart, you know, after so many years, you know, it's still just as good. It's still just as important to me. And so I sort of go back and rediscover that and find ways of actually fitting those influences back into the music that I'm recording later on in sort of the same sense that I did earlier. But now I can actually put those influences into more of a mechanical use, you know. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it's sort of a progression, and then sometimes you have to digress, you know, to continue to grow.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of you know, honestly, there's just not a lot of newer music that um, you know, that hits me that like that. It's so rare now, you know, when I hear
Yeah.
something that just kind of blows me away, you know, where it's like, wow, you know, because I haven't really had a new favorite album in so long, you know. And when I was younger, those albums used to come along all the time, you know, and so they're fewer and further between now. But you know, I think I mentioned it earlier. You know, I've just kind of been on an Allman Brothers thing lately, and just really digging like some of this old Allman Brothers stuff, and you know, some of the earlier Government Mule albums, which is not that old, but you know, there's just been a few things here and there that I've kind of passed over, and then it's been reintroduced to me later on. And you know, I look for things, I listen for things sometimes, but I just really, you know, it seems like I always go back to like the older stuff because I'm I don't know, man. There's a lot to me. A lot of soul is missing out of so much newer material just because it's um, like we said earlier, you know, such an oversaturation of the market. And I think I think music and entertainment in general, with with the internet and access to, you know, so being able to people being able to put their own stuff online and everything like that, I think that we've gotten used to a certain level of mediocrity rather than a level of excellence, you know.
Oh, I totally agree, and it's kind of sad, but every now and then you do get a few gems that come through.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I don't mean to, yeah, and I don't mean to sound like, you know, everything sucks. But I just get overwhelmed, you know, like unless somebody turns me on to something, I'm not really in there trying to find those gems like you're talking about, you
Yeah.
know. So unless
Oh
somebody,
yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people are commenting about and saying at the moment, and then there was that silly comment about that rock is dead. Well, I don't think that rock is dead or anything, but I do think that to an extent we don't have the same caliber and the same energy and vibe, so to speak. I mean, like, who's going to be the next Black Sabbath, or anything like that? There's not a lot coming through with that same strength and essence.
yeah, exactly right. And it's funny because you just reminded me of a conversation I had the other day with a guy. Um, and he was saying, that in the 80s, I mean, he's a bit younger than me, but he said, he wanted to learn to play guitar. And so in the 80s, and so he began learning to play guitar. And as the 80s came to a close, you know, and the grunge thing it came on the scene, and that became like the next big thing. And, and Nirvana and all that stuff. Suddenly, you didn't really have to be a good guitar player anymore because nobody was playing solos, and you just didn't have to technically be that good anymore. And he said, when the '90s came along, he said before that he used to practice because I got to be so good to be able to rise above.
Yeah.
And when the '90s came with the whole grunge thing, he said he basically stopped practicing. Goes, well, I'm good enough. I'm good enough already now because of this is what the new thing is. And that's not to say there weren't some good bands. Obviously they're going to be all kinds of Nirvana fans and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
what really breaks the bands is having good songs. Regardless if they have the technical ability or not. I mean, obviously Kurt Cobain could write good songs, but at the same time, he's still kind of playing like one finger lead solos. So there's good and bad that goes along with all that. And but I think that started that flow of as long as you can play a few chords, then that's good enough. And then everybody starts putting their, their songs on the internet and putting themselves on YouTube and this, that, and the other. And it's just everybody kind of wants to be privately be famous. So
Oh, yeah, no, I agree 100%, and that's where you come down to that culture of mediocrity, and I don't think that's a good thing, so to speak. But I mean, who knows? We hopefully will get a resurgence against that and get some good quality stuff coming through again. Not to say that there's not any good quality stuff coming through, but you know what I mean.
right, yeah, and I agree, and that's what I don't want to be. I don't want people to get the misconception, like we were just saying, that everything sucks and there's nothing good unless it's old, because that's not true. It just you just you kind of have to wade through a lot of things though to find those gems, like you said, and that's also not to discourage people, or anything like that. I just think that it would be nice if we could get back to a place, where there was higher expectations, as far as talent goes, rather than, just kind of good enough kind of thing. And that goes back, and that even reflects onto like what we see on, TV, and so what we call celebrities today. I mean, we have celebrities who don't do anything, where they're celebrities because they shop, or because they're rich and they shop a lot, or have a reality show on TV. you know, but they don't really, why are they so? That's the only reason they're a celebrity. They don't really do anything, though. So
Yeah, I agree with you 100%,
yeah,
and some of the stuff that's on TV is just like, oh my god, how did they actually, how did that happen? What's going on with society that we're actually letting this crap be
yeah. I
played
mean,
into in the week?
people are following people like the Kardashians, and and Paris Hilton, and what are they up to? Well, they don't. They're not. Why are we wondering what these people are up to? I mean, they're just basically doing nothing. I mean, they're living their lives, but as far as arts and entertainment, they have nothing to do with it. It's a complete disconnect. So
Well, that's it. And as far as reality goes, none of that's actually real. It's
None of it's actually
the-
real. Yeah, you have scripted reality. So it's
exactly, it's horrible. But anyway, we're digressing here.
yeah. Sorry, man.
No, you're right. It's always good to have an open conversation. And the next question I've got for you would be, what would you just describe as some of your career highlights?
Oh man, wow. Let's see. Well, I tell you, like probably one of the first highlights of my what would be called, what should have been a career highlight for me, actually was back in '94 when I was in. I don't know if you're aware. I was in Cathedral for a short time, and we supported Black Sabbath on a Cross Purposes tour, and that was in '94. That should have been a career highlight, and I guess it sort of was at the time. But the problem with that was I was in a pretty bad place, with alcohol and drugs and such. And I was a very angry person at the time. I wasn't a happy drunk. I was a very mean, angry drunk. And so during that time, which should have been, something
Yep.
really cool to be on and be doing at the time, I really didn't enjoy very much of it, and was very self-destructive at the time. Beyond that, though, I guess uh, there's been lots of highlights in the past, 10 years or so, with some of the Place of Skulls stuff I've done. I've been very proud is a word. I guess that's okay. I've been very proud of some of the stuff I've done with Place of Skulls. And then the European stuff, that I've been able to do with that, with festivals and things like that. And then, of course, with Pentagram, lately in the past 5 years, with the momentum that Pentagram has just been kind of overwhelming, really, altogether, just because after such a long period of time, of just being basically unknown and underground, but outside of the underground anyway, of music, uh, it's just really kind of taken off, and we've just been able to play, major festivals, um, you know, all kinds of things like that with huge bands, and just lots of interviews, like talking to you and all this stuff, man. But I tell you, a little deeper for me is when I get approached by someone, a fan, either in person at a show or something, or by an email or a message, or whatever, and saying how much a certain song has meant to this person because it helped them get through some sort of a hard time or a struggle in their life or a trial, and how encouraging it was, by whatever song that might be. Uh, and to me, man, that just like that always blows me away, and I just feel so humbled by that. That something that I've written, that meant something to me, and especially when it's a lyrical connection, and a lot of times that might be based on spiritual things or not. But the thing is, to make that connection with people around the world of just encouragement in general life, man, that your music has meant something so strong and so important to them. To me, that's the biggest highlight of the whole thing, is to be able to share that and have it come back around to you, and by having it come back around, know that you actually touched another human's life in a good way.
Dude, that's absolutely brilliant. And you know, as a fan, to be, that's something that I've always, my music has always been something personal to me. I'm not a musician by anything, but music has always got me through everything, and that's it. I mean, and to know that as a musician yourself, the fact that you appreciate that, that's pretty cool. So, dude, I mean, that's an awesome thing to have as a career highlight. So, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, man. I mean, that's just, to me, that's what it's all about. Beyond all the what people see as all the 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 rock star stuff that goes around, and not that I consider myself that at all, but as far, just for a lack of a better term, everything that goes on around the whole scene. I mean, to me, that's one of the unseen things that is actually the main highlight. So, yeah.
Well, I know it goes both ways, and as a fan, when I've talked to some of the bands that I've always been huge fans of, it's always cool when the that star or that band member gives you that time, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate it as fans when when the person interacts with us like that. So it's a two-way street, and like you say, it can be quite a touching thing, and it's an important part of of the music, and that's what it should be about. Is not just on a physical level, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. And it works that way for me too, still to this day. I hear there's certain songs that I hear that, depending on, what mood I'm in or what I might be struggling with. And life is just full of ups and downs all the time. So we're always, sometimes we're high, sometimes we're low. But I mean, there's still music, that I hear that when I'm listening to the song, it feels like that he wrote that for me, and or if not, he knows exactly where I am in this moment of what I'm feeling and what I'm struggling with or whatever. And it's just cool, to be able to relate to music that way.
Oh, dude, that's awesome because I mean, as a fan, once again, we're going back to being a fan. That's what I love about music, and the it's not just something to just for shits and giggles, so to speak. It's
Right, right. Yeah, and I tell people that too. It's when somebody relates that emotion to me about something I wrote, and that to me, and I say this to people, I said that means more to me than it just being, than it just being a heavy riff, oh, that's a badass riff. You know what I mean? Well, I
yeah.
appreciate that, of course. That's important, and I appreciate that because we should have fun with music. Um, but when it goes to that deeper level, and it touches our emotions and touches our senses and our spirits, and somebody expresses that to me, that is just, I'm always every single time floored and taken aback by it, and just so honored and grateful that I can be a part of somebody else's life in that way.
Oh, dude, that's absolutely awesome, and I know people that are going to be listening to the interview later on are going to appreciate that, because yeah, I mean, it's not very often that people talk about music on that level, um, and have that sense of understanding of what it's about. Because I mean, like I've seen in movies in the past and all that sort of thing, and that the joke about heavy metal saved my life, and people
Right.
go, oh, what the hell, you're talking crap. But the
Right.
fact is, for how many people heavy metal has saved their lives. I mean, as a young person, when you're going through the struggles and all that sort of stuff, um, of being a teenager and all that, and the emotional crap and all that,
Yeah.
nothing beats the music that you're listening to at that time that gives you the strength to go on. People that have been suicidal, that have listened to stuff, even Black Sabbath and stuff like that, and it's said to them, dude, live on. Can't count how many people's lives have been saved by music. And that's the thing. A lot of people will joke about it and say, "Oh, you're just talking crap," but no, it's a reality.
Oh, it's a total reality, man. And yeah, and you go through those years, especially, your teen, when you're an adolescent, you're just trying to figure out who you are, and and I reflect on that time too, and reflect on songs that I grew up with, like, the song 18 by Alice Cooper, uh,
Yep.
just that's one of those songs, man. Every time I hear it, I wish I would have written that song. You know,
Yeah.
I feel such a connection to it, and if I could, if I had the time to sit down here and like, write out, I'd have to obviously think about it. But I have so many songs, and we all do. We all have that, man. We have
That's
this,
right.
like, this log of songs in the back of our minds. When we hear those songs, man, it just puts us in that place, of how do you even describe that feeling, but we each know what that feeling is, and where it takes us in our own spirits and in our own minds.
Well, that's it, and I think to an extent it's a sense of understanding and knowing that somebody else has felt out there has felt that same way. So
Exactly.
it's that I'm not alone.
It,
Some people,
yeah, that's it, man. That is it. It's like just getting that I'm not alone, in this, and somebody else feels this way too. Wow, and that's just in that is our encouragement, to be able to go on sometimes.
Oh no, that's exactly it, and I completely understand and agree 100%, and that's where it comes down to listen to the music and appreciating and understanding it rather than it just being like hip hop and all that sort of carry on, which is what just about sex, drugs, and hoes.
Right,
There's nothing there to it, no substance,
right.
and that's the beauty of heavy metal and hard rock.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, we better wrap it up very shortly, but I've got one more question for you before we go,
Okay.
and that would be words of advice for young musicians.
Wow, man. I just reflect on what I've done and the path I've taken, as far as doing some things the right way, but also doing a lot of things the wrong way. But as far as just as beginning out on an instrument, I just had this conversation a little bit with Premier Guitar. He asked a question, about as I learned guitar and stuff like that. I was not a natural player. I had to put a lot of effort and practice into it. I met people, who pick up a guitar and 6 months later, they're burning, on it. And I was never that guy really. And so, as far as the mechanics of playing an instrument, I would say, like, say guitar. I mean, I would say, you know, walk before you run. You can be a great lead guitar player, and you might even have that gift, where it's just one of those natural things. But the thing is, if you're not a good rhythm player, then you have to be able to play a good song. It's not all about just being able to scorch, on a lead solo. Um, so, I mean, my experience in earlier days were, I just decided, well, since I have so much trouble with leads, I'm not really a natural at it. I'll just the best rhythm guitar player I can be. And then sort of the lead solo thing, started to fall into place after that. I mean, there were jams I remember in the old days, when I would be playing rhythm and then another guy would be playing a solo or whatever, really good solo, but then when he would switch to rhythm and it would be my turn to jam a little bit, he'd be a really bad solo rhythm player, and so then you have a hard time playing solos over that, so it makes you sound bad too. But as far as and that's just the mechanics of the whole thing. Just take it step by step and don't get ahead of yourself by playing a scorching lead solo before you can play good rhythm as well. But beyond that, with the lifestyle and everything that some people tend to fall into, man, I would say just keep your eye on the music. I mean, if you're in it to pick up chicks or whatever, like you hear a lot of the old behind the music rock and roll stories, and
Yeah.
like you kind of mentioned a few minutes ago, sex, drugs, and rock and roll or whatever. But if that's all you're in it for, then I guess you're going to get out of it what you put into it. But if you're into it because you want to be a serious musician and perhaps a career musician, man, I think you need to bypass as much of that stuff as possible. And that's not saying you can't have fun, but man, just keep your eye on the prize of the music itself. You got to look at people today who have lived a lifestyle like that. And of course, right now, man, you got to look at Lemmy, who's in
Yep.
the forefront of that whole thing, and Bobby too. Bobby, as a matter of
Yep.
fact, these guys have burned years, man, with that lifestyle, and it became to be expected of them, and it almost became part of their character was to be that way because people also expected it of them. But at some point in life, you have consequences to pay for all that stuff. Uh, it's not that you can't overcome it, but a lot of times our bodies pay the consequences of that, whether you're still doing it or not, and now he's in pretty bad shape, which is sad to see. And so, don't put too much into just being cool by partying and everything that goes along with it, man. Just keep your head on your shoulders and don't get sidetracked, with all with the extracurricular activities,
Oh, dude, that's absolute brilliant advice, and can't agree more. Especially looking at Lemmy of late, he's really burned himself out, and it's really hard to see. And like you say, also Bobby's another example of that, and once again, it's really hard to see how these people have disintegrated, so to speak. But once geniuses, and sometimes it gets the better of you.
Right. Yeah. So that's that's about all I got to say about it, I guess. So maybe somebody get something out of it. I wish I would have followed my own advice, in younger years.
Oh no, I think some people will take something from that, and I really appreciate it. I think it's good advice, and out there's so many pitfalls that people just don't even think about, and they're out there just having too much fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, dude, if you want to be doing it for a long time, you need to keep your wits about you.
Yeah, that's right, man.
Oh.